Thank you all for attending this Governance and Audit Committee for Monday, the 18th of September. Before I start, can I ask Gareth to read out the normal formalities for the committee, please?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. So can I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet and the recording archived for future viewing. Please could I ask all participants to mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback. And if someone wishes to speak, could they please use the raise hand function. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function should be used to highlight any technical issues or to get the attention of the chair or myself, a Democratic Services Officer. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for that, Gareth. So if we go into the agenda then, item 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any? No.
No apologies provided in advance of the meeting, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Item 2 then, minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of July 2023. They are for correctness only. Unless there are any, so anyone wishes to pick up any errors in the minutes, can someone please move? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Nigel. Anyone against? That's the easiest way to deal with them. No? Okay, they're carried unanimously. Item 3 then, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No, none show. Okay, item 4, the draft annual self-assessment 22-23, a referral from Cabinet. Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Good evening, committee. Thanks very much for taking this reference. I'm just grabbing my notes for you a second. As you say, Chair, this is a reference that Cabinet have made to your committee. They've also referred this to all scrutiny committees this month as part of the consultation process on the annual self-assessment. What they're asking for this evening is any views and recommendations for changes to the judgments that are contained within the self-assessment to be referred back to Cabinet for their consideration. So, as committee be aware, the Local Government and Elections Act 2021 requires now the council to keep performance under review, to consult and report our performance, and we do that through a process of self-assessment. So in terms of developing our arrangements for 23-24, we've considered the requirements of the Act and taken action to strengthen the self-assessment opportunities, so we now build that in throughout the year. The process of self-assessment is really important. The idea is that we take a self-reflective approach as part of our performance and governance arrangements, and that allows us to build a robust evidence base through the conclusions that have been drawn in draft this evening. And Appendix A to the reference is a position statement, in effect, on the Council's performance over the past year in delivering our priorities as set out in the annual delivery plan, which, as you are aware, contributes to the 5-year corporate plan, and importantly, it identifies areas where further progress is required, and those future focus areas will be reflected in the forthcoming annual delivery plan. Work is commencing on that this month. So the report itself draws on a wide range of different information sources to assess our progress against the wellbeing objectives. They include things like the quarterly performance reports, the findings from internal audit colleagues and the risk work programme, as well as things like the annual governance statement and the work of our regulators. Committee be aware that last year was the first year of self-assessment, and we undertook 5 directorate level self-assessments. That again has been completed in this year, Chair, as well as a series of peer challenge sessions where directors challenged one another around our individual judgments in terms of how we're applying the 5 ways of working that demonstrate the Sustainable Development Principle from the Future Generations Act. So reviewing all of that information has allowed us to develop a balanced picture of the Council's improvement work over the past year and to identify those areas for improvement. So the report itself provides an overview of the work that has been undertaken to meet the critical challenges of organisational resilience, Project Zero and cost of living. It provides a summary of progress for members against last year's areas of focus, as well as the performance information against each of the 4 wellbeing objectives contained in the corporate plan. You can see detailed information within there about the engagement, complaints and compliments work that has been underway, as well as an analysis of our use of resources and our governance situation. In response to feedback from elected members last year about the extent to which engagement and consultation findings are informing the self-assessment, along with the team have worked hard to put some more detailed information within each of the 4 wellbeing objective sections. They show for committee and other members the myriad of different consultation and engagement work that has been done on different schemes. It shows the findings and the changes that have been made as a result. So the voice of hundreds of residents and others is reflected within the self-assessment in a more detailed way than it has been previously. We are also undertaking the council's largest ever public survey, Let's Talk About Life in the Vale, currently, and we'll have some findings from that to go into the updated self-assessment report. So members will have seen there's a placeholder within the draft report for that information to be reflected. And I'm looking forward to bringing more information on that back to committee in due course. So it's within that overall context that the 2 main judgments have been reached. Firstly, a judgment of good in terms of us achieving the commitments within the annual delivery plan. Over 85% of the activities and targets that were set have been met or exceeded. And then secondly, the Act requires us to consider how we use our people, finance, assets, how well we manage risk and how well we use engagement insight. And members will see that overall the judgment against the use of resources against a challenging backdrop has been reached as being good. So the consultation is underway currently. It's the purpose of bringing it to your committee this evening, Chair. Following the conclusion of that consultation process, there's a particular requirement in the Act for Governance and Audit Committee to review the final draft of the self-assessment and to be in a position to make any comments known to Cabinet for their consideration. That will happen ahead of the report in its final state being presented to full council in November. It's a huge report, so I hope that was an okay summary, but obviously happy to take any questions, Chair.
Yes, thank you for that, Tom. I'm sure everyone's read the report in great detail. And before I ask for any questions, people are eagerly waiting there to come in. Councillor Hooper, can I just ask, what is Appendix B? We have an Appendix B attached to the report. There's no mention of Appendix B anywhere in any of the reports. So I'm just wondering what Appendix B is there for. I don't mean to catch you out, Tom.
Bear with me, Chair, and I'll let me just go through and I shall have a look.
The unfortunate thing is there's no page numbers either, so it just makes it a bit difficult.
Chair.
Yes, Nigel.
I think I noticed somewhere. Is it an accessible version of it or something like that? Did I catch in one of the papers somewhere?
Thank you very much, Nigel. It's been a long Monday. Yes, in response to feedback from one of the scrutiny members last year, Chair, at I think it was full council. There were some questions asked about the accessibility of certain council reports in terms of their use of screen readers to be able to actually read out for people who can't read the document itself. So Appendix B, as Mr. Ireland helpfully reminded me, is a version that is easier to read. It's in plain text. Further work is required to be done on that and is underway in terms of some of the descriptions of any diagrams and such like. But the idea is that as part of the process, we will publish an accessible version alongside the designed version.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tom, and thank you, Nigel, for correcting me there. I was going to ask where the executive summary was, because I looked at Appendix B and I thought it contained just as much information as Appendix A, but there we are. So, okay, first, Councillor Prothero.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Tom, as you said, it is a really big report. There's an awful lot of information in there, but it is easy to read. and I commend you for that, because to get that much information and make it accessible, I think is a real achievement. Clearly, there's an awful lot of work that's been going on, and the council has been doing lots and lots of good stuff. And I'm not really going to go into the detail with that, because I think it's about to me, it's about how we've presented this information and how we can share it, how we make it accessible to people. And you've done a really, really good job there. My only question, which is really one for context, which I know you're going to have to take away, so please forgive me, is just one of our headlines, which is the amount of money we're spending on agency staff, 6.5 million, which made me think, oh gosh, okay. And the context that I would be looking for there is, well, what percentage of that is of our overall salary spend, and what are we doing to kind of manage that? Because obviously I know we have to rely on agencies, don't get me wrong, but from a position of, and I know it's come down as well, so it's a good thing, but we don't really want to have members of staff employed via an agency if we can help it, because they don't get the same protections and all of that sort of stuff. So it's really what the council are doing to manage that better. What percentage of the overall salaries are we talking about here? And what policies have we got in place to make sure that, we don't have people via agencies for a long, long time? And this is a short sort of contract to fill a gap. That's it, really. But it is a good piece of work. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Councillor Prothero. Tom?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Prothero, and I'll pass on your thanks to the performance team. They're the ones who have done a huge amount of work, and it's really pleasing to see. So thank you for that. I can certainly take the question around agency staff and some additional context to go into the report. I know we had a question at council very recently on some of that, so that we've got some of that that information, but we can certainly make some of the connections into some of the risks around things like market fragility, that kind of stuff. But I'll make sure that's picked up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for that. Councillor Hooper?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom. And I'm going to balance maybe some of Joe's comments with the initial question, I suppose, is the audience of this document, because ordinary people, I can't see them engaging with it, reading it. It's extremely long. There's some technicalities in it. So I think I'd be interested in the audience for it first and foremost. And then if you look at the start of it, you've talked about balance, Tom. If we were to ask the people of the Vale for their thoughts of things, I think they would reference the fact that their council tax has gone up more than it did before, and services have gone down. And I think these things are balanced. This is there's a happy, clappy start to it. And actually, sometimes if this requires balance, I'd like to see elements of that in it, so that people, when they read it, just won't see this as being a one-way street. I've also, a specific point you mentioned as a critical challenge, Brexit in there, but there's no depth to that thing. And I think that's a bit of a, personally, I wish we'd not left, but anyway, it's a bit of a throwaway pseudo-political comment, and I don't think it necessarily fits in there in that regard. So unless there's some depth to it, I wonder why that word's in there. We also, Project Zero, this is another point of balance, Tom. This committee at this last meeting, and is referenced in the minutes, talked about whether or not our Project Zero should be considered a risk of catastrophic risk, and it was a conversation that went to Cabinet, and I've seen the reference back from Cabinet. And yet, if you read this, Project Zero seems to be working very well. We've got some bus stops being developed. I just wonder whether that needs a bit more balance to it. And then there was a point that made me smile in a not very good way, I suppose. When we talk about our progress against last year's area of focus, we've got a point that says we've introduced new technology to facilitate hybrid council and committee meetings. There's nothing hybrid about this meeting. There's nothing hybrid about our council meetings. I just wonder how these things have got in there when they're frankly not true. And I think some of these things need to be pulled out. And then just to finish, and this picks on Joe's point as well, and there's a point about absence days going up. Is that something that's led to this agency staff increase that we've seen now? And what I'd be keen to see, it's all, absence days going up. Does that compare with other councils in a similar light? It could do with some context to know, is it really, really bad? Or is it that's the world we're in at the moment. That's it for the time being. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper, for those copious number of questions. Tom, can you get the bones out of it, please?
I will do my best, I promise. In terms of the audience for the document, Councillor Hooper, this is a really hard one because the council is required to demonstrate our compliance and the fact that we've embraced these regulations of the Act, and the guidance that accompanies Part 6 to the Local Government and Elections Act is very prescriptive in certain areas. So therefore, some of the language used is quite technical, and it is quite a long and lengthy document and what we're required to do, and the process that I want to make sure we've got in place is really robust, and therefore it does mean that sometimes it creates a big report. One of the things that I think there is a definite opportunity for us to do, and we're doing this to an extent through the consultation, is we break down the main findings of the report. That brings with it its own challenges because I want to show you all the evidence base, but then I have to summarise it in order to be able to get some of that engagement. And part of that is the reason for putting so much more of the ongoing consultation and engagement work into the report itself, so that we're not just consulting on a final or a draft version of a big council report. What we're saying is actually the engagement and consultation that's been done throughout the year has informed that draft, so that there's a bit of that two-way, if you like. In terms of critical challenges, Brexit isn't one of the critical challenges, but it's certainly within an organisational resilience context. One of the things that we see is contributing to our organisational resilience and in effect the challenges to the resilience of the organisation. But I can certainly make sure that the way that is woven in is a bit clearer, because if that's how it was interpreted, it's important we get that right. Certainly, Project Zero is a good example as well, in terms of this report is about of the activities that we set out and members approved in terms of service plans at the beginning of the year. Have we achieved what we said we'd achieve? That's a different question to, are we going to stop climate change and the impacts of climate change on the Vela Glamorgan as an area? So it's really about giving you a balanced picture of, have we achieved the things that we said we would do in terms of tackling climate change? You're absolutely right, though. We'll obviously come on to the corporate risk register later on your agenda this evening in terms of some of the considerations, and I can go into a bit more detail if that's okay. Certainly happy to note the comment around hybrid meetings and the fact that we'll be having those hybrid meetings very soon. And certainly I can put some more contextual information in terms of absence, and picking up on Councillor Prothero's point around the use of agency staff, but also the general kind of trends and pressures that we've got on the council's workforce. That's something that Corporate Performance and Resources Committee have also requested, so we can certainly weave that in.
Go on, Councillor Hooper.
Just the point about critical challenges, Tom, it's in under the page, our critical challenges, in about the 4 sentences down, it mentions Brexit. So if it isn't a critical challenge, we need to be careful about it being in there contextually, because if someone's reading this, as I have done, I've just thought, why is this down as a critical challenge? So you saying it isn't, well, it's written as if it is. So I wonder whether that needs a little bit of thought. But apart from that, thank you for your explanations. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Are there any other questions? I had a quick hand up then. Councillor Good, John?
It's just some comments, if I may.
Well, can you just hang on a minute, because I've got a question.
No,
that's very kind of you. Thank you. Tom, in regards to balancing the report, again, it's all down to how well does the council know itself in regards to moving forward. And the presentation of the report obviously sets out, look, what we said we'd do, what we've achieved, but where actually does it tell anyone what you didn't achieve?
Absolutely. So in terms of what we didn't achieve, that's focusing in on that 15% of actions and measures. So what yourself or readers of the report will be able to see is under each of those 4 wellbeing objectives, the performance information, summary information there that shows the extent to which we've achieved or not achieved those actions. What we have also done is make sure that they're reflected in the Directorate self-assessment. So when we went through that process, we looked specifically at end-of-year performance, Chair. And for my directorate, we had a number of outstanding actions that hadn't been completed. I was challenged as to what the reasons for not having completed those were. And what we've looked to do then is reflect those in the areas of future focus for 24-25. So again, they're not lost. They're then updated and fed into next year's process where they remain relevant.
But should they not be in this report, though, to say actually, because all it does is paint the picture where, where you are. We've achieved all this, great, and we set out copious amounts of evidence and data. But would it be worth actually saying of those 15%, here is exactly what they are. This is why we haven't met it, but we will be delivering them next year, because obviously somewhere I'm not saying they may get lost. The directorates will pick them up. But if a member of the public or a regulator reads this, maybe they'll say well, you actually, you haven't set that out. I didn't know whether that's possible to do.
It would be really straightforward to do, actually, Chair, because we take an exceptions report to each of the committees at the end of, as part of quarterly monitoring of our performance, and definitely at end of year. And what might be useful to meet that request is actually we put a composite of the actions and measures that didn't get attributed a green status at end of year, with a little bit of commentary as to whether they're no longer required or whether they should be carried forward. We can certainly do that.
Okay, because again, I was just looking at the what the regulators said on. Again, there's no page on it. I'm very sorry. Oh, yes, there is 22. I think it is 22. About the HMI inspection of the Youth Offending Service. We've got organisational delivery required improvement, and then you've got out of court disposals assessment inadequate. And for me, that just gave me a little bit of concern. There's obviously some narrative about your response, but how, if you have an inadequate, then there is a response there, but what's the outcome of it? How is it going to be improved? How is it going to be delivered? Those are the only things that sort of were concerning me. And if that hasn't been picked up as an area for improvement, this is what we haven't done, is that again, it may be lost.
And we can certainly, as we bring the regulatory report recommendations to your committee on a regular basis, and we see them at the Insight Board on a quarterly basis as well, I'm wondering, in a similar vein to the performance exceptions, what we could do is underneath each of those regulatory sections, make a reference to the report tracking mechanism so that yourselves are able to see that link and that loop back to make sure that they're not lost.
No, that's great, because I don't think I've seen those before, but there we are. Matthew, have you got a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, 2 if I may, Tom. Evening.
Yeah.
One that's going to be probably quite general compared to some of the others, and I guess it's how comfortable are you, or are you comfortable that where all these statements are made, that they can be corroborated with evidence? I wouldn't want the council to fall foul of well, you said this, but that's not necessarily true. That's number one. And number two, maybe is a bit more, I think I completely appreciate and agree with all the engagement surveys and response. But if I look at some of them, and then you've got some of them, the numbers of actual respondents, we're talking maybe single figures, low double figures, or something that doesn't necessarily feel representative. And I wondered what your threshold or cutoff is to actually taking that and using it as a fair representation of what the of what the people of the Vale want.
Okay, Tom.
Yeah, thank you very much. In terms of the level of comfort, in terms of the statements and the judgments, This is it's a subjective process. We've tried to apply some science or a methodology to it. That's the reason for starting work with both the engagement information, some of the information around our resources, looking at those directorate self-assessments, and then aggregating those things up. The process of consulting, bringing it to yourselves for scrutiny alongside the committees is part of road testing some of those judgments and statements. So it's a collective effort, if you like, of trying to reach two judgments based on a huge amount of work and lots of different aspects. And I suppose the important thing for us is not in the did we get two goods, but it's in what do we need to do to keep those goods and to drive improvement into the next year. So it's almost, is it telling the story of what do we need to focus in on? In terms of the second question, Matthew, around engagement and consultation, we don't necessarily set thresholds because depending on the engagement or consultation exercise, we might actually only be looking at targeting a relatively small number of people, and we haven't got a mechanism for those kind of things to be making them purely representative of the community. The idea, I suppose, is to demonstrate that actually those voices on different issues are being heard within the report. But the survey, the Let's Talk About Life in the Vale survey that I mentioned, that we're working in partnership with Data Cymru on, is entirely designed to get us to a point where we have that representative sample of respondents. It's why I'm banging the drum for it at every available opportunity for colleagues to share that survey, because if we can achieve the response rate that we're targeting, that will put us in a position of being able to do some of that statistically valid work in terms of looking at different communities that are representative of the Vale, and that's the piece that will come in later on in the autumn as we move through the consultation.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Are there any other questions? No comments, so we'll come on to Councillor Goodjohn first, seeing I cut Councillor Goodjohn off. Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start by concurring and thanking Councillor Hooper for many comments? Words taken right out of my mouth. However, I would like to quickly comment that the council tax rise this year in 23-24 was the lowest ever in real terms of this authority. So there has been improvement on that front. I want to hammer home the point that he made, though, on Project Zero, because there was discussion from you, Tom, on the commitments that we have made on what we are going to do. Well, we have also, just as much as the annual delivery plan, we have committed to 2030 net zero target. And I think it's really important that we include the risks that are included within that and the many hurdles that we still have to face into reaching that target. And I didn't fully feel like that was represented within the document. So I think that's an important one to note and think of in the future, particularly because, you know, it was this committee that only at the last meeting was discussing whether we were or were not quite at the risk of catastrophic. I think it's an important thing to note. Quickly, if I can note on the report regarding the WLGA, it's included as some of the successes is the continuing work of our lobbying of Welsh Government via the WLGA. And I wonder, although this is an important part of the work that the council does, how much that can really be included as the work of ourselves as we are lobbying another organisation to perform activities that, of course, is for the betterment of the people of the Vale. But I wonder if in a self-assessment we can really include that as a success. And I wanted to touch on transport, public transport investment. I think, although there has been a huge amount of success in the council that is included within this document that needs to be highlighted, I think there has been a commonality of taking schemes that have existed for a very long time and then putting that down as a success, which has not been an improvement on last year. So, for example, regarding wellbeing objective 2, it says later on in the report that there was £3.686 million of investment for transport improvement, but later on that in that very same statement it says it was 4.1 million last year in 21-22. When we're talking about our corporate objectives and our requirements under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015, we have to consider the fact that although there's a huge amount of work that's going on, there are risks, and when services are cut, that really does harm our communities. We talk about the success of the current schemes, but when those schemes go, that can cause a huge amount of harm as well. So I think we just need to be balanced with the report. I think it is one-sided, although that is always going, I think at Homes and Safe Communities, they made a comment that that is always going to exist to some extent with a self-assessment. But I think we need to be honest, and the more honest we can be as an organisation with ourselves, the better we can improve the services that we have. And that, I think, is the reason that these documents have been brought to us by the Welsh Government as a requirement of what we need to do for us to really improve as a public service in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Plenty of comment there. There were lots of questions in there as well, but I didn't know whether, Tom, you wanted to respond to any of it or just leave it as it is.
Certainly, the one that I can come back to Councillor Goodjohn on this evening is around that lobbying via the WLGA for multi-year settlements. It's something that perennially comes up as part of our self-assessment, self-reflection work in terms of being able to plan into the medium term. We'd very much welcomed having indicative year 2 budgets from Welsh Government, but we will continue to lobby for genuine multi-year settlements. Obviously, the WLGA is a collective of local authorities, so we're as much part of it as it is of us. So that's one example of the various ways that we continue to work with Welsh Government to try and get those multi-year settlements. In terms of some of the questions around public transport investment and infrastructure and the risks, I can certainly take that, Chair, as a comment away to ask the team to reflect on as part of the consultation.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Councillor Prothero.
Sorry, Chair, it was a question, really, and I didn't quite squeak it in time. And this is really to do with the layout and the body and the content of the report, because this requirement to do an annual self-assessment only came in 2021. So I know it's all quite new. The question is really, do we have from Welsh Government a kind of like a set standard that you need to be reporting on, and a level of depth that is going to be, produced by all of our local authorities? This is a really big report, as we've said, and I commend you for that. 70 pages, but is another local authority going to be producing 7 pages? And that is perfectly acceptable. It's just that. So for consistency, have you been given some guidance?
For consistency, we haven't been given guidance other than what the content needs to be. In terms of the depth and breadth, Welsh Government have been working alongside all heads of policy that WLGA convene on a really regular basis, and we've really welcomed those informal sessions where we've been able to come together and exchange ideas, experiences, discuss the content and the presentation. The ones that we've reviewed that as a team we felt give the right level of coverage, but not too much, but at the same time not too little, are similar kind of sizes to our self-assessment report. We continue to pinch ideas and learn from our colleagues across Wales, though, because it is, as you say, it's a newly establishing process for us.
Thank you. I would expect nothing less.
I was going to say, Councillor Prothero, if I had my lawyer's hat on, I'd be saying, Tom, I just want to know yes or no. But it was a very good response, Tom. Thank you very much. But, you know, it's typical of the way Welsh Government works. We'll now have 22 different formats of the same report. And I'm sure colleagues from Audit Wales will come in and inspect them at some stage and, you know, say, yes, there's some good ones and no, there are some bad ones. So, you know, why not keep generating work for local government? There we are. Okay. Any other comments? No. There are no recommendations for us, Tom, really, because they come out of the Cabinet report. So basically, what I was going to suggest is that the recommendation, the resolution coming from us is that having considered the draft Vale Glamorgan annual self-assessment report 22-23, the assessment 22-23, the comments made by members of the committee be referred to Cabinet for consideration. Would that, are members happy with that? Okay, can I just have someone then to move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a second, Councillor Prothero. Can I have anyone object to that? Any objections? No, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, members, for your contribution there. Very excellent. Item 5 then is the Q1 Treasury Management Monitoring 23-24. Again, another referral from Cabinet. Hi, Gemma.
Hi, good evening. Q1 Treasury Management Monitoring. So this is a new set of monitoring that we'll be bringing before Governance and Audit Committee. It's required by the CIPFA Code of Practice. It's very much because it's the first time we're bringing this report before you. I think we very much want to develop this report and make it, you know, useful and meaningful for committee. So please, if there are suggestions or things that you think it'd be useful to draw out or scale back on even, then please let me know as part of this item and we can feed that into the next round of monitoring. I've just got a few slides to share with you to take you through the report. Okay. So as I say, this has come out of the kind of CIPFA Code of Practice, and there are various prudential indicators and treasury indicators within the report that we've kind of updated our position on. In terms of changes, there's very little change since March. There's some change to the capital programme, and we've also brought in as a pipeline scheme, the borrowing associated with the non-treasury investment strategy that went to Cabinet recently, and that's profiled over 4 years of the capital programme. But generally, you know, the changes fall well within the limits that we set as part of our treasury management and investment strategy. So in terms of borrowing, due to the current high borrowing cost, the council tends to be self-financing its capital expenditure, maturing debt, and so we see a reduction in our external borrowing to 145.7 million, and that obviously falls well within authorised limit and operational boundary indicators we set for the year, and our borrowing costs have also fallen because a lot of the borrowing that's tending to fall out at the moment is historic and has got quite high levels of interest. But obviously there will come a point as our reserves fall where we do need to replace that borrowing, so we do need to manage that interest risk within the overall treasury management strategy. And then just in terms of one more slide on investments, so as we are starting to spend our reserves as a council, and we are seeing a reduction in reserves that we can use for investment. So we've had a slight reduction in the first quarter of the year on our investment balances, and in terms of how those are invested, that's set out within the body of the report, but the majority of our investments are with UK local authorities and Treasury bills. We do have a sum of just below 10 million with money market funds, and that average rate of return is starting to increase as well. Those are the main points I was going to draw out on the report, but I am happy to take any comments or questions.
You're muted, Chair. Yeah, you're muted.
I am. I'm very sorry. Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Gemma. I'm just interested in the local authority investment pool that we go into, and given that we've seen in the press recently a number of local authorities in England, I think the colloquial phrase is going bust. Does that represent any more risk to us in the future with us putting our money there, or is it as safe as it's always been? Thank you.
So I mean, the Ministry of Local Communities and Housing previously said they won't allow any local authorities to go bust, and there is an underwriting kind of legal underwriting of local authority investments, which I think gives us the I think it gives us the power to precept in those local authorities should anything happen. We do review who we invest with, because obviously we don't want to do any of that. So we do have a kind of list that we keep under review of who we don't want to lend money to. Sometimes obviously people get added to the list after the event, after they've issued a Section 114 notice, and you know, we have limits on our investments for that very reason, and typically our investment terms are less than a year, which again reduces our exposure. So I don't think we have significant exposure in this area at the moment, but something we'll keep under review.
Thank you, Gemma. Councillor Goodjohn.
Hiya, and quickly, can I just say thank you so much for putting this together. I think it's a very simplified, reasonable report, which I think is very good for anyone who has an interest in what the council's doing on this subject, an easy read. Can I ask if we can include in future our current predictions on future interest rates? Because I would be very interested in what the current and future predictions are as we go through a somewhat unstable period.
Yeah, absolutely. I can add that into the next round of monitoring that comes forward.
Fantastic, thank you.
Just to follow up from that point, Gemma, presumably our advisors will provide that. I think it's normally done over a number of years, isn't it? It's a bit like crystal ball gazing, I think, but that should be easily obtainable. I think just quickly, but you know, I think the report is, you know, fairly straightforward really, and it's brought to us, as you say there, you know, that all the changes were managed within the current limits granted by the council, so there are no real issues. I think for me, if in the future, and I think Councillor Hooper made it, if we're likely to be exposed anywhere in any of our investments, then you know that's when a report of urgency, I think, needs to come to us just to explain you know, what the urgency is, what the exposure is, and what mitigation there is in regards to what the council's doing. You know, we wouldn't be, I should imagine, the only council with investments in that organisation. There will be many others. So I think, you know, as I think Councillor Goodjohn said, no, keep these coming, but in reality, you know, if it goes outside the Treasury management policy or there's some real exposure, then yeah, I should imagine Cabinet and Council will know before we do, but you know, it's very, very interesting information. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any comments? No, there being no comments. Again, this is a referral from Cabinet, and I think basically that the resolution there, and I think our recommendation should be that the Q1 monitoring report on Treasury management be noted, and I think that's it really, because it's been referred to us, and we're just going to note it, you know, in due course, unless there's any difference from any member on that. No, can I have someone to move that recommendation then, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you. Anyone against? No, there are none. No, thank you. Thank you, Gemma, for that input. Item 6 then, we've got the Audit Wales draft detailed audit plan 23. and a Q1 update on the Audit Wales work programme. Hi, Steve.
Hi there. Thank you, Chair. Hello there. Hi, all. Hi. Yes, we've got 2 agenda items to run through here. The first of which is our external audit plan for the year for 2023. First of all, probably best if and appropriate that I apologise for the late issue of this plan. Normally we bring this plan to this committee around about the springtime or so before we actually get involved into in the actual audit of the accounts. But due to the I suppose it's well documented really, the slippage in our work programme, which is across all sectors, not just at the Vale, I should add, and the introduction of a new auditing standard, ISO 315, our audit work to inform the plan slipped, and we only completed this during the summer. So today really is the first opportunity we've had to bring the plan to you, and which I'm glad to do so. The plan includes financial audit and performance audit matters. Sam is present here today from the performance audit team. She will cover the performance audit aspects of the plan in the second agenda item, the next agenda item. But obviously, there's any questions on the plan which relate to performance audit, I'm sure Sam would contribute. So you're stuck with me for the moment, so I'll take you through the audit plan in terms of the key contents, just to bring them to your attention, really. The audit plan is within the pack, so I'll be referring to the page numbers as I go through the audit plan. So page 6, if I can just take you to that aspect, that part of the plan, because this page refers to our financial audit responsibilities, and I think it's useful just to set those out, just as a reminder and contextualise really of what this plan is trying to set out really. We audit various accounts the council produce, not just the council's own financial statements. We also audit two of the joint committees hosted by the council. Their financial statements for the year, and those 2 joint committees are the shared regulatory services, which cover things like environmental health, etc., and also the joint adoption services. Now, it's the first year we're actually undertaking the audit of the joint adoption services in a full audit, because the audit threshold has been surpassed. So yeah, there might be further comment on that as we progress and further things to feedback to you as a committee, but we will be producing separate audit plans, and they be going to the joint committees as opposed to this governance and audit committee. If there's an appetite for them to come here, I'm sure we can put them here for information, so that might be something you might want to consider. The other audit we do is the independent examination of the Welsh Church Act Fund, which is the charity fund hosted by the council. That's an independent examination and not a full audit. And finally, we also certify a number of grant claims and returns, such as the housing benefit subsidy claim that's issued to the DWP. The final aspect of our work really is more ad hoc really, and it's more demand led, and that's all in regard to various pieces of correspondence we might have from local electors. They could object to the accounts, for example, on the grounds of spend that they might deem to be illegal. Obviously, we would need to consider that. We don't take that as read. But there's work there in regard to those items of correspondence that we may or may not have to undertake. As I say, it's very much demand-led based on what we receive. If I move on to page 7 of the plan, as I say, this provides an overview of the performance audit work, which Samantha will be covering in a few moments. And page 8 then really, just keeping the theme going, I guess, in terms of financial audit. As I said, we've undertaken our planning work for the year, and there's been 5 sort of areas of risk as we've identified to demand particular focus as part of our ongoing financial audit work. The first one of which is management override, and this is, I guess, is the deliberate misstatement of the financial statements. Now, I don't want to set alarm bells ringing and for you to think we particularly think this is a particular matter at the Vale, it's in the plan because per auditing standards, we've got to consider this as a material risk. Bodies can manipulate the accounts and window dress the financial statements, if you like, to make them present more favourable, and we need to consider that risk in all of our audits. So this risk will appear in all audit plans for all bodies that we audit. So it's not unique to the Vale. There's 4 other risks there, rather. One is in regard to asset valuations and another one in regard to pension fund accounts. Now, the reason being why these are deemed risks is that they're inherently risky, to be perfectly honest. We're dealing with large values, a large degree of estimation, so they are sensitive and prone to error. A small change in, we're dealing with large figures, so a small error don't make much sense really, but a small difference in the estimation of a certain item could have a material impact on the financial statements. There's 2 other risks which are quite closely aligned as well. One is in regard to related party transactions, and the other one is in regard to the senior officer remuneration disclosures. Now, we deem these as being sensitive. We feel the electorate and the public at large, a reader of the accounts, would be interested in those values. So the accuracy of those figures is something we'd be paying particular attention to. And the final risk that's communicated in the report is a new accounting system that's coming into place for 23-24. Now, this doesn't in many ways mean a direct risk to the accounts for 22-23. This is more about us being able to access relevant financial information, financial data to support our audit as the council transitions to the new system from the old system. We've had no issues in regard to that this year, I should add. It was deemed a risk, but now we undertaking the audit. I think it's been quite clear that documentation and data and information is being provided. Page 9 of the report sets out the levels of materiality we applied to the audit. Just to rewind a bit, when I say materiality, what we're talking about here is the threshold by which we consider the council's accounts to be true and fair. We can't be accurate to the penny when we make that when we provide that opinion, so we apply a concept of materiality, and that level for this year is £4.8 million. Again, that's using standard methodology that's consistent across the UK public sector bodies. However, we do apply a much lower materiality level for those areas we deem sensitive. A few seconds ago, I just referred to what they were: the senior officer remuneration note and related party transaction disclosures. Moving forward then, page 11 provides further information on those audit risks I just referred to and our planned approach to mitigate those risks, how we plan to tackle and explore and examine those areas. I won't go into them in any detail. I think I've covered the key points a moment ago. What I will do though is move on to page 14. Page 14 sets out the timetable of our financial audit work, and you will see, from the timetable that we are in the process currently of auditing the financial statements of the council, and it's a good opportunity, I think, just to give you a quick update on that. We are making good progress, and we are on track to provide an opinion for the end of November. There's no issues arising, I'm pleased to say, at this stage that I feel I need to bring to the attention of the committee. So hopefully that provides you some sort of assurance, really, that things are going well at this stage. There's still a way to go, though. So let's let's not count out chickens, I guess. But it's going well so far, so good. Page 15 refers to the performance audit work programme again. I'll pass over that for the moment because Samantha will cover that in terms of the next agenda item. Page 17 then sets out our estimated fees for the entirety of our audit work. You will note, I'm sure, that there's been an increase in the fees this year. I hope we've given you sufficient sort of heads up, if you like, in terms of the reasons for that this year. So hopefully it's not a surprise to this committee, but as a reminder, this is due to a universal fee increases that Audit Wales has had to apply across the piece, really, across all sectors of our audit work, and it's due to inflationary factors and the introduction of this new auditing standard, ISO 315, which has had a fundamental impact, if you like, in terms of how we're going to undertake our work as within the financial audit sphere of our audit work. I will add, it is an estimated fee. We can't charge more than the cost of the audit, so it's very much an estimate at this stage, and we'll assess it as the audit commences and completes. And finally, before I stop and take any questions, page 18 just sets out the key members of the audit team. And I'm pleased to say we've got some really good continuity on the team this year. There are some changes, though, as probably would be expected. Julie Owens has come in as the financial audit lead. But Julie is a very experienced audit lead and has you know, been undertaking audit work across the local government sector for some time. And similarly, there's been a change at the performance audit lead, in so much as Samantha, who's here today, has replaced Ian Phillips in terms of that role. So I'm sure Samantha will say hello in a moment and introduce herself to you, but I'll stop there and take any questions you might have on the plan and its contents.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Are there any questions from anyone on that? Matthew?
Hi, Steve. One question on the audit fee, Exhibit 5, page 17. And maybe it's a question, or maybe it's a request of both. I guess I saw the proposed fees for this year. It's the actual fee from last year, but I had to go back to last year to find out what the actual budgeted fees are that. So I guess from the questions of that, in future, could we have a view of what the actual spend was against the budget for the year? And from that, I think the budget last year for grant certification was 45k, if I'm compared to last year, right? And the spend is 63. So I wanted to know what the driver was behind that, and then how it influenced the fee for the coming year.
Yes, okay, that's a good question, and that's a good point you make about the budgeted fee as well. First things first, our grant certification work is charged on, you know, as it's incurred, it's done on a timesheet basis, so it's very much an estimate. But that's, I suppose, the only way I can answer this really is that that estimate was flawed for that work last year. You can see it's increased this year, and our work on the main driver behind that increase, and which difference between the actual and the budgeted, was the length of time it took, I guess, to do the housing benefits subsidy audit work. It is a lengthy audit. It's very difficult to sort of predict the level of audit work that's required, and very often if we find an area that if we find an issue, additional sample testing is required to sort of bottom out whether it extends across the wider population. And the work we undertake in this audit is driven it's driven 100% really by what the DWP require us to do. So we've got very little flexibility really in terms of how we undertake that work. What I would add, despite the fee increasing to the extent it has, the actual difference in the subsidy between the draft subsidy claim and the final audited subsidy claim was hardly anything. So the impact of our undertaking that work was almost it's negligible really, but what it has done is provided assurance to yourselves and to the DWP that the claim is reliable and a fair assessment of what should be paid.
Sure. Sorry, if I can just come back on that, Chair. I think it's one of those things. I guess ultimately the work done is the work done, and the cost is the cost to an extent. For us, I'm just keen as from the committee's perspective to understand what we're getting and whether those budgets are fair. Interested in your comment and appreciate I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, so feel free to take this away. When you said if you find errors, then you have to do more work, and I wonder if that was actually a driver, and that's something that I might have completely missed in our committee papers or anything, or if it's just timeliness, complexity, and that's what's driven the extension this time round. But appreciate you might need to take that away and find out.
No, it's certainly a complex grant claim to audit. It's very technical because we're looking at housing benefit law, really, to be honest. And does our claims processed accurately? That's the matter. And sometimes we find something which could be an error, and it might have no financial impact on the subsidy, but we still got to understand: does it have a wider impact? Is that a wider error affecting the whole population in terms of that cell value, which we examine? It's very much there's a multitude of cells within the return issued to the DWP, and whether it requires reporting to the DWP. By all means, we could in previous years. This is going back probably, in the old days, I guess, of local government audit. We would sometimes issue a grant certification report to bodies. And that's something we could resurrect if you wish, if there's an appetite. But given we audit far less grants than we used to, the appetite, I think, for that type of report has dwindled. But if there is additional information required, by all means, we can consider that and pick that up with officers as well.
Sorry, not a request from my perspective. I guess I'm just keen to understand the difference. And
okay.
And when somebody says there might have been issues, I'm just keen to know if they have or haven't been. But I mean, yeah, you will be useful to see what the actual this point next year versus the proposed was, and understand the differences for that. But thank you for your explanation.
Just to set your mind at rest, though, in terms of issues, we're bound to find issues on when we do a housing benefit subsidy claim audit. It's so complex. There's so many rules and regulations to follow. But to put your mind at rest, we issued a very clean report to the DWP. Very often we would qualify a claim, which we, and there was a qualification, but it was very minor. It wasn't anything that's I feel gonna come back and bite the council. We were, and secondly, terms of financial impact on the claim, as I say, that was negligible. So it was a good outcome for the council, I think. Putting aside obviously the cost of delivering the audit, but in terms of the outcome, it was a positive outcome. I don't know if Gemma wishes to add anything in regard to that. I can see she's turned the camera on, so I'm wondering if she's got any commentary to add. So
no, it was just that clarification, Steve, that you were likely to find issues due to the complexity and the quantity of transactions you're looking at. But the important thing, I suppose, is that it doesn't have an impact on the overall value of the claim, or a significant impact anyway. So, and of course, as Steve said, the amount that's spent on grants then informs the budget for the following year. And we wouldn't ideally like to be this far astray from the budget, but certainly that's fed into next year, where hopefully we'll be able to bring some of those timescales down a little as well.
Thank you, Gemma. Andrew?
Thanks, Chair. Just following on from Matthew's point, really, were there significant issues identified during the report compared to previous years? And if so, were they reported anywhere? So it's basically following on from what Matthew's already said. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, Andrew. As I say, the financial value by which the claim had changed was negligible. It was, the claim, the value escapes me. We'd be talking about multi-million-pound claim, really. It's in tens of millions of pounds, and the change was minuscule, really, relative to that. So it had no financial impact on the council. But in terms of the qualification letter we issued, that was very clean. there wasn't really much to report to the DWP. Very often, in many other councils, I'm sure Andrew would have seen this previously, sometimes we find a plethora of issues that we need to report to the DWP, and then the DWP would undertake further work and then come back to the council and maybe even retract some of that subsidy from the council. But in terms of the content of our letter to the DWP this year, it was very clean. And I would anticipate there'd be no comeback to the council whatsoever in regard to this. Certainly, we haven't had a request to undertake any additional work or anything of that nature. It was a very clean report. Previous years, we've also had clean reports, but in other years, you know, it can dip really, depending on our findings. It's very variable. Sometimes we do report some quite more meaty issues, if you like, to the DWP. But this year, as I say, it's been a clean report.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other questions for anyone for Steve? I've just got a couple, Steve. The comments you made on page 6 around the audits of the shared regulatory services and the Vale Valleys and Cardiff Adoption Services Joint Committee. Do you see any reason why they shouldn't come here? Because it is a function which these organisations carried in out for the authority, and obviously the authority is contributing to the service. And I make mention not only to those, I also make mention to the Central South Consortium, the Education Consortium, which you may or may not be aware of. And clearly, I don't know whether we actually see their audit in regards to their financial issues. And I only raise this as well because I think it was Councillor Hooper raised the issue about the city deal accounts and that, and we don't see, obviously we don't see the city deal accounts, even though I believe they had to be included in the council's accounts this year. But whether we actually ought to see the audit as well, because you know, again, that organisation and Central South, they all carry out functions for the council through a delegated agreement or whatever. So I'm just, you know, I'm just wondering if we don't do it or any of the other councils don't do it, who actually does their sort of assessment of their audit?
If I can respond on the city deal, that's hosted by Cardiff Council, as I'm sure you know. So the governance aspects in regard to that would be picked up within Cardiff Council. Whether there's a mechanism to get the, sounds like there's an appetite. I'm reading within the room, the virtual room, to see sight of that sort of our audit of accounts report, our information on our opinion and the amendments made to the accounts, etc. That might be something I can explore, but it wouldn't be normal practice to bring that to this committee.
I think the difficulty obviously I've got, and that maybe the members of the committee got, is the council pays a significant amount of money into the city deal. And again, who provides the assurance and governance for city deal? I know there's a joint committee, I believe, or whatever, but who provides the governance and audit for that city deal?
Yes, well,
do you not understand what I mean? I'm not trying to be awkward here, but it may be slipping between two stools, and I don't know. But you know, I think in some respects, even if the committee gets to see them for information purposes only or whatever, then again, you know, it can then be fed back through the leaders who sit on the city deal or whatever. You know, that respective challenge, should there be any.
Yeah,
I don't want an answer straight off, Steve.
I think I can probably. I'm not sure if there's any. We audit Wales, audit the city deal financial statements, but we do it under the auspices of the Cardiff City Council audit team. So it's done within that team, as in the same manner, because the adoption and the SRS joint committees are hosted by the council. Myself, will pick up the audit of those financial statements because they're hosted by the Vale. So the city deal accounts are audited, and they're audited by Audit Wales, but by the Cardiff Council audit team, and they'd be producing audit plans and audit reports on the outcome of that audit. That may or may not go to their audit committee, but they would certainly go to the city, the city deal joint committee. So the name escapes me, the formal name of that group.
Okay, and before Councillor Hooper comes in, I just got a couple of other questions. On page 13, which is the related parties and senior officers remuneration, it's just whether you could sort of give some guidance really for elected members, because presumably you'd be looking at those related party pro formas where they declare whether there are any interests and whether or not someone should pick it up from this committee just to ensure that councillors are advised further that they need to ensure that their related party formats are updated.
Yes, a key part of our audit really is the accuracy and completeness of those disclosures. So it's not just are they accurate, it's, did they accurately reflect the various interests members may or may not have. Key to that are the declaration of interests forms that members submit. But the other aspect of that, I don't think I'm letting any audit secrets out of the bag here. We for the completeness angle, we also look at things like Companies House and consider are they complete? So it's not just relying, if you like, on the declarations made by members. I don't know if that helps.
Well, that's very useful, because I think maybe not a matter for the whole committee, but maybe in an assurance point that members need to be made aware of that. It's not just because they write it down on their form, they're, squeaky clean, that there are other things that you will do to maybe investigate that. So just thank you for that, and maybe that can be fed back somewhere else. And the other one about the fee, which obviously Matthew picked up. Does the council know it's getting value for money?
That's a very good question. It's hard to answer in some respects, but in terms of peace of mind, we do moderate our fees against other audit providers, so we don't feel we're out of kilter with people like the National Audit Office, Audit Scotland, and in Northern Ireland. So we don't make these fees up, so to speak. It's a sound basis for them, and we also do a consultation exercise every year. We've got one ongoing currently in terms of audit fees. But in terms of value for money, I think that's within the eye of the beholder to some extent, isn't it, really? I hope we do, and I'm sure the Auditor General hopes we do. But yeah, it's as I say, it's very subjective to some extent.
I know, and it's the same. Yes. I raised it somewhere else this morning with one of your colleagues, and the issue clearly is, you can't go anywhere else. So we could test the market somewhere else, but we can't go anywhere else. And the other thing is just a simple point. I think this is obviously the estimate is the estimate, and as you said, the financial audit of accounts is going extremely well at the moment, touch wood or wherever. Yes. So I'm just wondering if the estimated amount actually you didn't require all that money because it came forward sooner rather than later, would there be a reduction in the fee?
Yes, of course. Under the Public Audit Wales Act, we can't charge more than the actual cost of delivering the audit. So it's very much in the council's interest, the officer's interest, I guess, to engage with the audit process and and make it as smooth as possible, I guess, exactly. and produce good quality draft accounts.
Exactly. You never know, the fee may go down to minimal about shortly. Thank you, Steve.
But on that point, that we do actually give refunds. It's not, I made that point perhaps a little bit too flippantly, but we do actually, it does occur. So.
Okay. No, thank you for that. Thank you for answering that. Councillor Hooper.
Unsurprisingly, Gareth, you probably realise I was nodding so my head almost fell off. City deal. This is an issue of wider transparency, I think, as well. So I'm just making the point, supporting the point that you made. I think there's a dislocation between what happens in the city deal and what happens with the residents of the Vale of Glamorgan, and I think this is one way that we can try and solve some of that, so people recognise where things are. And the money, remember, is going up from this year and next year, so we're spending more money with them than we were previously. So I think it's going to become more of an important issue than it maybe has in the past. So just supporting that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hooper. Are there any other questions on Steve's part of this report? No, okay, so we're over to Samantha now, I think.
Steve, did you want to talk through the financial audit work element? Sorry.
No, yes, I will. Yes, before I do, and whilst I'm on camera and unmuted, there's very quickly, the first part of the paper talks about some financial audit aspects, and I'd be very swift. There's only three things I wish to say, really. One, I've already said, we've commenced our audit of the 22-23 financial statements, and all going well to date. The two other aspects relate to our grant certification work. This paper refers to the fact that our 21-22 work was still ongoing. Now I can now confirm that's all complete. It's very much just a timing issue between writing this report and where I am today, or where we are today. And the other point then is our 22-23 grant certification work. We make the point they will be commencing in the near future, and it's just to say really that we have actually started that work. We've looked at the return in regard to non-domestic rates, and we started our work on the return to the Teachers' Pensions Agency. So we're yet to start our work on housing benefits, however, but that's all I wish to say really in regard to that. So I'll hand you over to Sam now, and she'll take you through the performance audit aspects.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Chair. So by way of introductions, I'm the performance audit lead for Cardiff and Bridgend councils, and I've just recently taken over the reins for the Vale from my colleague Ian Phillips. And I suppose, it's worth saying, hopefully this will provide some benefits, from a broader public sector footprint. And as you've mentioned in this meeting, some of those shared services. So introductions aside, the performance audit work programme then, on page 2, the 22-23 performance audit work programme. Just to save time, I will simply run through those pieces of work that haven't actually yet been concluded. So the first one is capital programme management. We've recently decided that we will not do this work at all councils as part of our 22-23 work programme. But we are currently exploring our options for doing a piece of work on this specific area. But this will be now part of our 23-24 work programme. And we will confirm this in our next quarterly work programme update. So the next item was and this is page 3, sorry. The use of performance information, and this is with a focus on service user feedback and outcomes. This report, I understand, is now going through clearance with the council. Then the thematic review, and these items are on page 4. The thematic review of unscheduled care and digital reports. Those reports have been drafted and they're currently going through our internal moderation and our QA processes. So that's all I wanted to say on 22-23. So then moving on to 23-24. We'll shortly be sending out our draft assurance and risk assessment project brief for discussion with officers. But as you're aware, this work is ongoing at all times behind the scenes. And we've set up our joint regulators presentation with senior officers for early in 2024. So that's all been organised. And as you know, this meeting is essential for us to inform the development of our following year's programme of work. So then in terms of the thematic reviews, we have yet to develop these, although we will be looking at financial sustainability and commissioning and contract management. And then finally, the review of planning service governance arrangements that is well underway. So obviously this report is dated to the end of June and we are almost approaching the end of September. So I just thought I'd take this opportunity very quickly, if I may, Chair, just to advise the committee of some of the published national reports that are currently on our website. So on the 15th of September, approaches to achieving net zero. And I just thought that this was definitely worth my mentioning after the conversation about the risk assessment in that regard. Then the 12th of September, I was bringing forward lessons learned report, and this was based on our review from a year or so ago now on workforce and assets. And the key evaluation was local councils have made major changes in how and where their staff work, but need to build on their experience of the pandemic. And then on the 1st of August, building safety. A key evaluation, I know, very topical, fears raised that new building safety regime is not being prioritised and resourced. And then finally, I just want to mention, I have just sent an email with a diary marker for our next good practice exchange event. This is strategy to action, how digital makes a difference to everyday lives. And this event is currently scheduled for 2 dates, on the 27th of September and the 5th of October. And just a very brief description, this event will take a practical and honest view at the digital landscape in Wales, and it will offer practical ideas for public and third sector organisations to help achieve the best value for money. So that's all I wanted to say there. So I could pause here for questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Samantha. Are there any questions? Councillor Hooper, you're poised there for a question? No? Okay. Can I just ask of you, just on that final issue about the digital good practice guides, is that for elected members or officers?
This has been sent to officers. Now, I'll be honest, I've literally just sent it out quickly today. I'm assuming that it is for officers and members, but please, can I come back to the committee and double check?
Yeah, that'd be so, because obviously, are they being held in 2 different locations?
And again, I am sorry, I don't know the details on this. I've sent the diary marker. And I'm sorry I can't provide any more information, but obviously the officers do have the link. The person who's responsible for it in our organisation, so that contact is there, or failing that, please contact me and I can provide the information.
Okay, I didn't know whether sort of Tom could pick it up if any elected rep members would like to attend, if it was of interest, or obviously in regard. So, okay, Tom?
Yeah, no problem at all. And thanks for sending it across this afternoon, Sam.
Lovely, thank you. The other question I've got, in regards to the thematic reviews now on financial sustainability and commissioning and contract management, have you any idea of sort of the scope of that in regards to whether you'll be looking at very specific items? One that comes to mind at the moment, which sends shivers down my spine, is the Welsh Government project of Eliminate in regards to children in care, children looked after, and the requirement of not using private sector providers to provide it, and now for local authorities to provide that in-house. And I'm just wondering whether there's been any work done to actually demonstrate whether this is value for money, bringing it all in-house, or actually leaving it with private contractors. Because the concern I've got is years ago, care homes for young people who were looked after were disposed of because they wanted them to go back into the community. However, it seems as if it's going the other way now, And that financial impact on the council will be quite substantial, together with every other service it has to deliver. So obviously, Samantha, I don't know whether you can answer that, but it's a key area for me, and I'm sure there are many other areas where additional costs are coming in, and there's actually no thought, in my opinion, about delivery.
Okay. I can only provide some assurance. Because of our approach now to developing and delivering pieces of work, we will involve the council at some stage as part of that scoping exercise. So that's all I could really say on that at this point in time, because I don't think, unless you're aware, Steve, I don't think these projects have been scoped yet.
No.
So I'm not aware.
No. And again, I don't know, Tom, whether that would be, again, a matter that obviously the management team will need to look at. But I think and I'm sure they've looked at it already with the Director of Social Services, but it's a huge commitment going forward. And I think you've only got a very fine timetable in which to sort of bring it in.
Absolutely, and we have had some tentative discussions about it, Chair, but I can certainly bring it up at SLT now in the morning.
Yeah, if you can, again, it may not be of an issue for the Vale, but for others.
We need to understand it.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thank you for that.
And also, it's probably worth my mentioning, as part of the assurance and risk assessment fieldwork this year, we've mandated a set of interviews with senior management team members to give them an opportunity to tell us what they think the key risks are facing their service. So there will be opportunities.
Yeah, and I think that's essential. And whilst officers obviously are there to deliver, I think sometimes it's worth speaking to the portfolio members as well, just to say, look, the impact on social care budgets, as you know as well as I, are enormous. And I think, adding extra burdens doesn't necessarily assist local government. And it's just knowing what work needs to be done to deliver. It's got to deliver the best outcomes for the people that looked after children, or children looked after, and for the council and its communities. So thank you for that. Okay, are there any other questions? No, any comments? No comments? Okay, I think the recommendation is that we note the contents of the report and the appendices. So we do that. And that the subject recommendation, what this report and appendices be referred to Cabinet for their oversight. I think maybe some of the comments made in regards to the audits of those joint service being provided, City Deal, maybe Central South Consortium, and the issue about maybe the Eliminate programme, and I'm sure there'll be many others in the council, just need to be made to Cabinet for their consideration, and I'm sure, Tom, you'll ensure that's done. People happy with those recommendations? Can I have someone who can move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Wood. Anyone against? No, thank you. That's carried. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair.
You're quite willing to stay if you want, or if you've got something else better to do, then happy for you to leave. But if you want to stay, more than welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Item 7 then, the Corporate Risk Register.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Just to let you know, that digital event, I think, is largely aimed at council staff, but I think some elected members might be interested. I'll make sure that the details are circulated, and there are 2 events, one in the north and one in the south. So in terms of the Corporate Risk Register, before you this evening, committee, this is at Q1. There are 17 corporate risks on the register, 5 scoring high, 4 medium high, 7 in that medium territory, and 1 scored medium low on the register. In terms of the movement within Q1, all risks have maintained their static position with the exception of market fragility. That risk, as members will be aware, is the fragility of of the market within social care, and that's been reduced to reflect the significant improvement that social services colleagues have experienced in terms of the domiciliary care market. And the report includes some information just illustrating the changes to the marketplace for dom care. In terms of the future direction that is being anticipated, forecast direction of travel, we're anticipating that financial fragility, workforce and Project Zero risks will continue to escalate over time. We mentioned as part of the annual self-assessment report item earlier, Chair, around Project Zero. Following consideration by the committee at your previous meeting when we were looking at Q4, Cabinet did as requested and considered the residual risk status of very high, which has been attributed to the risk because committee had asked whether that ought to now move to catastrophic. Cabinet felt that at the current time it was suitable to retain it at the very high status, but the Project Zero board is meeting a week today, and that's a timely meeting because we've got the latest data that has been submitted to Welsh Government relating to the Council's carbon emissions. What I've suggested is that as part of that agenda item, we'll have a look at that data. We also are having a discussion around the Scope 3 emissions, those ones within the supply chain where the majority of our emissions sit, and we can then have a conversation in the round again in terms of the residual risk scoring. So a further update will come back to you in due course. So that's a really quick overview, Chair, of Q1 risk. Obviously, happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Tom. Any questions from members? No? Okay, I'm just wondering, Tom, in regards to the corporate risk register, the maximum score, obviously, maximum score is 16. And I'm just wondering whether or not risks which are below 8 should actually be recorded on the risk register, because clearly this is a compilation of all directorate risks as well, and those which they find which are the greatest risks within the directorate. But I was just wondering on your thoughts of saying, well, actually, a corporate risk above 8 are ones that we should have as a corporate risk, and anything below that should just be a directorate risk and managed within the directorate.
I think it's a really useful challenge, and I would I'd almost turn the question back around to elected members. I mean, the risk register in this format is brought to committee for the oversight and assurance that that risks are being appropriately managed. And what I wouldn't want to do is have an approach where we're managing things behind the scenes and we're not exposing those to yourselves as elected members and members of the audit committee. That said, I think the kind of tolerance threshold, or the threshold by which things meet or to get onto the register is a good point for us to reflect on. I met with colleagues this afternoon to talk about the update to the risk management strategy, and one of the things we're considering as part of that is the sort of risk tolerance and therefore what levels we'd expect to see being reflected. So I can certainly build that into those conversations. The only other thing I suppose I'd add is that these are the residual scores, so showing obviously how effective the controls are at meeting certain things. And I know in the past there's been some interest in keeping a watching brief on certain risks as well. So perhaps what we could do is examine whether a certain threshold gets onto the register, but then you may want to see a watching brief for a period of time. So you might have a risk that scores greater than 8 for a period of time while you're seeing how things play out, and then it maybe drop off. So having a little bit of fluidity, but certainly something we can take away and have a look at, Chair.
Okay. All right, thank you, Tom. Thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Goodjohn.
Can I respond quickly to Tom's comments there, and yourself, Chair? I do think it is important for the matter of public record that a large number of these risks are reported in this document, and I think particularly in the unfortunate situation that something does go wrong, that these are then examined in a retrospective format, and that this is considered that we were aware of these risks, what we were doing on controls and how we were scoring them from an external perspective is an important matter of public scrutiny. So I think there's that to consider as well. I recognise the point made, and I think there needs to be something said about the scale of the different risks and how that works as a large number, either 6 or 12. There are different levels that we have depending on the likelihood and the impact. So I think it's a matter that should be examined, but I would make sure that we note that this is also a matter of public record and for public and media scrutiny if that is something that people want to do in the future, especially if something does go wrong.
Thank you for that, Councillor Goodjohn. Okay, are there any other comments? No. Okay, we go to the recommendations, and we've got firstly the recommendation is the note Q1 report of the Corporate Risk Register outlined in Risk Summary Report Annex A, and obviously I don't think there's any comments to go to Cabinet on this occasion, but clearly just a matter for officers to consider, I think, Tom, in regards to what I've said. You know, I'm not saying to do it, and Councillor Goodjohn obviously raised the issue as well, but just for consideration of the officer team. So recommendation is number 1, but there isn't anything yet for number 2. So members happy to move the recommendation that we note the Q1 position? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Seconded by Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. It's a legacy hand. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much, Tom, again for the report. We're then on to the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, External Peer Assessment of the Regional Internal Audit Service. Andrew?
Thanks, Chair. Evening, members. Yeah, this is something we've talked about in committee previously. Members are asked to consider, acknowledge and then endorse the report this evening. It is the external peer assessment of the Regional Internal Audit Service, benchmarked against the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards. Hopefully members will agree this is a good news story this evening. In terms of the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, they came into force in 2013, were updated in 2017, and all internal audit teams, providers within the public sector, within the UK, have to comply with those standards. As part of those standards, we need to make sure that we are undertaking a self-assessment on an annual basis, and every 5 years we're asked to undertake an external peer assessment. The Welsh Chief Auditors Group determined in the first round of assessments 5 years ago that it would undertake a peer review where heads of audit within Wales, within the 22 authorities and those participating, would undertake the assessment of another internal audit team within Wales, albeit not a neighbouring internal audit team or geographically close. That approach was agreed with the Section 151 officers at the time and with the external auditors. So this round of assessment was undertaken by Newport City Council. At this point, Chair, I do need to declare an interest because at the time I was the Chief Internal Auditor of Newport City Council, and we started undertaking the peer assessment prior to me getting this job at the Vale. That said, it was undertaken jointly with my audit manager, who has 16 years plus experience, qualified as a CIPFA accountant, and has been an audit manager herself for 16 years and is therefore very well qualified in terms of undertaking an assessment against the standards. Standards themselves are there are a requirement to comply with 305 best practice lines, and the external report is attached to your papers this evening. It's quite a comprehensive report, goes into quite a lot of detail, but the conclusion is that the Regional Internal Audit Service is compliant with all 305 requirements of the standards, and there's no partial conformance or no conformance areas. There are 2 areas for consideration just to further improve compliance against the standards, just to make sure that they are providing an even better service moving forward. And the service itself recognised some good practice points to move forward as well in terms of developing its own action plan to top and tail the standards themselves. So big thanks go to my predecessor Mark, and to Joan and to Lisa for making sure that the team were in order and were totally compliant before I actually came on board. So thanks, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Members, questions? No questions. Are there any comments? Councillor Hooper.
So I think obviously good news story, Andrew. I agree with you. I'm just wondering of the value of these and your view and people's view of the general value. I wonder, I presume you did one of these with somebody else. Does the report look similar, or does it widely different? I'm not trying to be dismissive of it, but it's, you know, if you look at, there's a line of ticks all in the same place, and it brings that question to mind.
Okay, so I think there's 2 points there, Councillor. There are 2 ticks because it's a follow-on from the self-assessment. So the region itself felt it was compliant, and then the external assessment team came in and did the additional additional assessment, and therefore put a tick or cross next to whether they felt it was compliant based on the evidence that was provided. As you can see, it's fully compliant. There's a standard approach, so the report will be consistent across all participants across Wales. I think there are 20 local authorities who have agreed to be part of the external peer assessment review. The Welsh Chief Auditor Group is monitoring the progress of the assessments because it's once every 5 years. There was a window in which you could undertake the assessment, so they're not being done exactly at the same time. But what the intention is that the group will identify when all are complete for the second round of assessments, and then do a comparison of what the issues are, what action needs to be taken in terms of non-compliance, what the general themes are in terms of how we can all improve moving forward to make sure we are compliant with the standards. And at that point, Chair, I'm happy to share that summary with your committee when that's produced.
Okay, now I think that would be very useful for the committee to see. Okay, are there any other questions or any other comments? No, just one comment from me, Andrew. I think the team and yourself need to be congratulated, and certainly Mark previously on to achieving what's there. It's a substantial document. Hopefully it means that there will be continuous improvement within the service. Clearly there are 2 areas which just need to be slightly addressed, so I'm sure you will address that, and I should imagine the next one's done in another 5 years' time, is it?
It will be, Chair, and thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thank you and your team for that. Obviously, it demonstrates certainly compliance. If there are no further questions, then or comments, we come to the recommendations, and I propose that the recommendation be that the public sector internal audit standards, external peer assessment of the regional internal audit service be acknowledged and endorsed, that the regional internal audit service is fully conforming to those standards. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? No, thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair.
The next report is the Draft Governance and Audit Committee Annual Report 22-23.
Thank you, Chair. This is me again. If you're happy for me to go through it with you and your committee, Chair, This is something we talked about previously in terms of the committee itself having an annual report.
Yeah.
So this is the draft Governance and Audit Committee annual report for 22-23. So this is on behalf of yourself and the members of committee. I've drafted the first version, and I'm quite happy to take comments from members as we progress, or if you want to feed back to me at a later date to further improve what's been noted in this particular report. But at the end of the day, it's your report, it's your annual report, and then in the future we can build on this to make it to improve it as we go forward.
Yeah.
So it's good practice to do an annual report, and members are asked to give due consideration and comment on its own draft annual report for 22-23, and if they so agree, then present it to council for their consideration as well. So the council's Governance and Audit Committee has a responsibility for ensuring that there are procedures in place within the council to guarantee the adequacy and effectiveness of financial control and corporate governance arrangements. And it does this by compliance with its terms of reference are set out in the Constitution, which are in line with two key elements of legislation: the Local Government Measure and the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. So one of the requirements of the Local Government and Elections Act 21 was for Governance and Audit Committees to have a third of its membership as lay members and for the chair to be a lay member. So it's reassuring to note that the Vale Governance and Audit Committee has had its full quota of 3 lay members during 22-23. The chair was obviously the lay member, and there were 6 elected councillors on board as well. The committee held 8 meetings during the municipal year. In terms of the workload for the year, that's set out in para 2.1 and the bullet points, which complies with the terms and conditions, and there's further information in the attached report in terms of the detail of how you've actually achieved that. In terms of the compliance with the terms of reference, I've also made sure that you've complied with the SIPFA guidance on core functions of the Governance and Audit Committee to make sure that good practice is being delivered across the board and is consistent with expectations from a recognised professional body. The report also contains the results of a self-assessment checklist that was undertaken by my predecessor, probably the back part of 2022. Positive response: 89% of members felt that they had a good knowledge and experience across the various statements that were asked, and had a good or satisfactory knowledge in that particular area. There were some areas where there needed to be improvements, and hopefully training will be provided in due course as a result of that. So just quickly going through to the report, Chair. As I mentioned, the detail of how you've undertaken your business and complied with your terms of reference is in the detail of the report, and it's positive. There's information around the self-assessment, and to conclude, you have complied with your terms and conditions, and the outcome of the self-assessment is very positive. Appendix 1 of the attached report outlines the terms of reference of your committee. Appendix 2 identifies all of the reports which have been presented to and considered by the Audit Committee, Governance and Audit Committee, during 22-23, as set out as per the date of the meeting. And Appendix 3 is the summary of the outcome of the self-assessment which was undertaken by members. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour through, Chair, but hopefully members will agree it's a positive report. But like I say, it's on behalf of you as Chair and your members of the Governance and Audit Committee. So I'm happy to take any questions, comments, or areas for improvement.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for that. Any questions, members? No. Oh, Councillor Goodjohn.
Can I ask, following on from the self-assessment of good practice, there was some comment of worry from one of the elected members regarding the fact that there were expert auditors now within the committee, and that they felt that they didn't contribute quite the as valuable a response to the reports as they were, and felt like they could not contribute quite as much from that. Have we got any kind of plans to rectify that? Perhaps some more training might be positive to try and improve understanding of the audit and accounting functions that might be able to assist that elected member.
Thanks, Councillor. There are training sessions available for members. I think there's certainly been one on treasury management, but we can certainly look into that. I'm not sure what's been delivered to date, but I can check. But what I would always say is there's no such thing as a silly question. It's meaningful to the person asking that question, and we'll, as officers, will do our best to respond. But we'll certainly look into the training aspect to make sure that that aspect is covered.
Thank you, Andrew. Any others? Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, there's Andrew. I guess maybe it's a forward-looking question or request, possibly. I was trying to remember when we filled in this good self-assessment. I think it was October last year, and I certainly wouldn't like to speak to any members of the committee, but I wonder, certainly from my perspective, whether I'd have a slightly different view 11 months on and 18 months in role as opposed to 6 months in role than I might have in this. So I wondered whether for the next iteration we might consider whether we could do something a little bit closer to the time.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely agree with that. It is a bit late in the day bringing an annual report to your committee. This will be the first iteration of it. Hopefully we'll undertake a revised self-assessment in October, November this year, with a view to putting an annual report together, probably in the spring, so kind of May, June time next year. So it'll be on a more timely basis next year.
Okay, any other questions? Any comments? Councillor Hooper. Thanks,
Chair, and thank you, Andrew, again. I think picking up on Councillor Goodjohn's point about a member feeling the struggle to be able to give their all to this meeting, I wonder whether actually part of that is because of the medium that we're using. You know, it's a flat medium. You don't get to be able to see how other people react. And I think that shows that the sooner we can get to hybrid meetings for this committee, I think the better, so we can be in front of people. So that's one comment. The second comment was the point above that. And this was one of the lay members who said about the size of some of the papers that come to this meeting. And I think that's still a very real point. You know, even this evening, if you look at the number of pages we're expected to go through, I think that we can miss the wood from the trees if we're not careful, and I think there's a lesson for us there, and perhaps it's up to us as a committee to challenge some of that as well and be a bit more honest and just say, why have I got 173 pages or whatever? I think there's stuff of that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hooper. The only comment I'd make is that rather than rush this through now, is to allow members of the committee 4 weeks to comment upon your report, Andrew, or my report, because obviously you and I have not discussed it in great depth, and I think I'd welcome the opportunity of that, and I would also welcome the opportunity of comments coming from members of the committee, because clearly if there are issues being raised by elected members about the training. I got training down as one of the key things. We've had very limited training in reality, and some of the issues we deal with are extremely complicated and technical. You know, and Samantha and that, Gemma and that sort of produce it on treasury management, but there are other sort of the accounts and capital program, etc., extremely complex. And I'm just wondering whether, picking up the points from Councillor Hooper, Councillor Goodjohn and Matthew, is actually we sit down and say, look, you know, please can elected members provide some comments if they wish to. Maybe we could do a little questionnaire to say, look, you know, what's the good points, what the bad points of the committee, etc., and, you know, what do we need to improve? And then following that, draft, you know, an amended report. And my view would be is either to bring that to the December committee for sign off rather than rush it. So, because I think there's a lot of things to be said and they need to be picked up. This is an improvement agenda for us. You know, it's the first 12 months or 18 months you've had lay members. You know, I'd be interested to know what the councillors think about, not about the individual lay members, but what contribution they actually make to the committee. Because I've got a very strong view about it, but it would be also interested about the elected members as well. So I'm just wondering whether the committee would accept that, you know, the recommendations basically be that we wait for we allow 4 weeks for any comments to be made to Andrew, and then depending upon those comments, that a further report then come to committee in December for sign off and for referral to council. I don't know what members' view would be on that, and I just open that up for any comment or discussion. Councillor Hooper.
Well, given that we've just spoken about people not feeling like they can contribute, we should definitely do that. I just fully endorse that. I think it's an important thing to do. So yes, please.
Okay. So if there are no other comments, can I just say then the recommendation that members of the committee be given 4 weeks to provide any comments they may wish to have on the Governance and Audit Committee annual report or draft annual report for 22-23, and that following that, that the annual report come to the December committee, I think it is, for consideration, and then for hopefully endorsing and referral to full council. If elected members, committee members are happy with that, can I have someone to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you. Anyone against? No, that's carried as well unanimously. Thank you very much. But then on to the progress against the internal audit risk-based plans 23-24. Hi, Joe.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. This report is to provide members of the committee with a position statement on the progress being made against the audit work included and approved within the Internal Audit Plan 23-24. The Regional Internal Audit Service has set quarterly targets to monitor the delivery of the approved audit plan. And it's hoped that this will assist in ensuring sufficient audit coverage has been given to the council to provide an overall opinion at the end of the financial year. The targets are set out in the report, and at the end of Q2, which is the 30th of September, the target we're aiming for is 30% completion. As of the 30th of August, 14 of 61 planned audit reviews have been completed, and this equates to a completion rate of 23%. Table 1 within the report explains the status of the planned audits, and Appendix A gives the detailed information. Audit opinions have been given to 11 of the 14 completed audits as at the 30th of August. 9 audits have been given substantial or reasonable audit assurance, and 2 audits have been given limited assurance. The identified risks found in the 2 limited assurance audits are specifics to the service, and these are detailed within the report. The approved plan includes 21 audits that were not undertaken or completed in 22-23. So in order to be transparent with members of this committee, we've pulled this detail out, and Table 3 shows the status of these audits, and these are also detailed in Appendix B. To summarise, 6 of the 21 audits have now been completed and 5 are in progress. Appendix A also identifies that 31 recommendations have been made to date, and more detailed information is included in the separate recommendation monitoring report. That's all I'd like to say, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joan. Any questions, members? Matthew? You're on mute. You're on
Sorry
mute.
again. Sorry again. Thank you for this, Joan. Thank you for the detail on the limited assurance reviews. That's very useful. 2 points. First one, if I'm playing devil's advocate on point 2.2, if we're aiming for an 80% completion rate on the plan by Q4, why I'm not on completing the other 20% of the plan, why would we include it on the plan? I guess is that, if that's not too overt. And the second one, if I jump right ahead to the recommendation, overdue recommendations, and it's less for you and more a query on I guess the owners of the recommendations. There's still some stubborn ones that nobody appears to want to complete the recommendations we've asked for them. Are we escalating them in the right way to actually get them done?
Okay, thank you. If I can answer that. If I just answer the recommendation monitoring question first, that's more detail in the next report that's coming up after this item. So we have got a process in place. Perhaps we can pick up then. And as far as the 80% target at the end of Q4, obviously we always set out to achieve 100%. That's why the plan is based on a full complement of staff and the number of days available. We at the moment have still got vacancies, so we're just being honest, I think, and trying to be set a target that we think is achievable as at today, but obviously things change. Andrew's got his camera on, so he may have something to say as well.
Andrew?
Thanks, Joe. Just to reiterate that, really, these are best guesstimates based on our experience. You know, we've been doing this quite a long time in terms of pulling a plan together, and we know things happen which take you off track. So it is as realistic as we possibly can be. We're trying to make it achievable. There's no point setting in a target which is unrealistic. But we, as Joan said, we're there or thereabouts at the moment. We're on track, but we know we've got vacancies to fill. We've had some long-term sickness in the team. We've now got a maternity leave. We have brought in some cover, but you can't always balance the cover with the vacancies you've got. So we're trying to be as realistic as we possibly can.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Councillor Prothero?
Yeah, I was going back to, I think, what Matthew was saying about some of the audits that have been carried over. And I know you know what I'm going to say. So procurement has been carried over for probably 2 years now, I think. And I noticed there's no data against it again. There's also the review of the scheme of delegation, and I noticed in the note there that we're looking at particular attention to the awarding of contracts, and those two things are obviously linked. So I'm just wondering, is this going to feature in this year's review? Because it would be really helpful if it was.
Okay, if I can start off and answer that then.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Procurement has featured in a various number of audits that we've done that are service specific. So we have been looking at audit, if appropriate, in individual audits, if you like.
Yeah.
I understand your concern with the procurement audit, if you like, that's on the plan. The reason it wasn't done last year was because of the new arrangement that was being put in place with the Vale working alongside Cardiff. So it was felt that last year there was no point in doing that because that was being set up. For that reason, then we've agreed now that would be done towards the latter end of 23-24 to give this new arrangement time to sort of embed, and any changes. The procurement strategy, for example, has been reviewed, things like that. So it's going to be a value when we do go in, rather than to hit the service once immediately when the change has taken place. So we will do it, but we have agreed to put it to late Q3 or Q4 for the reasons I've just explained.
Does that also apply to the scheme of delegation as well, Joan?
Yes, yeah, it's all,
Okay.
as you quite rightly said, it is part and parcel.
Yeah.
So it seems silly to do 1 out to 6. They'll be done around about the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Any comments? Okay, a couple of comments from me, Andrew, in regards to paragraph 2.6, which are the limited assurance opinions. Clearly, the first one in regards to the payment card industry's data security standards, which obviously is concerning, given that the accompanying attestation of compliance has not been completed. The questionnaire presumably has not been done either, and there are some other issues outstanding there. And the second one, which is the appointee and deputy services, is the concern there is that the council presumably are holding funding and finance which doesn't belong to it. But it concerns me that, firstly, there are no policies or procedures for the management of these accounts. So who actually knows what's going on? And thirdly, where you've got a deceased client, presumably that money's still floating around in the account somewhere. And actually, it should have been returned some time ago to the estate, I assume, which may well have been wound up by now. I just got, we've got no idea. So the comment I'm going to make is there any reason why we shouldn't get the service manager and maybe the director in to actually set out what they're doing in regards to those 2 areas? Most probably 2 different service areas and 2 different directors. But clearly they need to understand, in regards to the funding of someone who's in council care, and we've got responsibility for their finances, it seems quite quite draconian, really, that we actually don't know. We haven't got any policies or procedures, and actually we've not paid out monies which we presumably may be holding in regards to not just one deceased person or a second.
Okay, Chair, yeah, I think that's it's a very valid point. In terms of our process, where we've got a limited assurance or no assurance, then we would undertake a follow-up audit, and we will try and do that within, depending on when we issue the final report, but generally within 6 months after the final report has been issued. And we always make sure that the service manager agrees with our action plan, so they are agreeing with our recommendations to make those improvements in terms of service delivery. We'll just have to check to see where we are in terms of those follow-ups when the final reports were actually issued in terms of the those 2 individual reports. But yeah, by all means, there wouldn't be a problem. I mean, you could get a progress update with the services in terms of the action plan completion. And we do check, we do make sure the audit teams are on the case with implementation of recommendations, which is the second report that Joan will be presenting this evening. So that might be a little bit clearer where we are, but the service manager will agree to put an implementation date within the action plan. And then that is seen by the head of service, etc., when we issue the final report. So where we are, we do follow a process to make sure those recommendations have been implemented, to move it out of a limited into a reasonable audit assurance opinion. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Joan.
Only quickly, in respect of the appointee and deputyship audit, 4 recommendations were made, and as Andrew said, they were all agreed. The last one is due to be implemented by the 31st of December. So for that reason, we wouldn't do a follow-up until after that date, but we are keeping in touch with the department to make sure that they are doing as they've said, but we will go in, if we can, Q4 or immediately in Q1 to do a follow-up as well with some more robust testing to make sure it's been done.
So the question, why is it the final one's delayed till the 31st of December? Given the serious, it is fairly serious, really, in regards to holding people's money.
the department gave us realistic dates when they felt that the implementation could be made, and in that particular one to the 31st of December they wanted to seek legal advice to see how they could go about finding the correct contacts as far as the estates were concerned. So they didn't want to set themselves up to say they could do it immediately.
Okay, and what about the payment card industries?
I haven't got that one up. That was delayed, the implementation there, because of the Oracle Fusion delays with the implementation. So I know there were issues there. If you bear with me, I can quickly see. Sorry.
No, that's okay. The only other thing is, Tom, I know I'm asking you a bit to do tonight, but maybe you could make the directors aware that we've got an eye on these issues, because again, it's just concerning that these matters are outstanding, and clearly the one impacts on individuals and individuals' estates and that. So if you could just make mention to it, I'm happy to wait. Hopefully the committee's happy to wait until December, but it does need to be resolved as a matter of urgency, really.
Yeah, no problem at all, Chair. And one of the things that we have introduced, and Joan and Andrew come to leadership team now on a regular basis to make sure that there is this oversight and scrutiny at that strategic level within the organisation. But I can certainly follow up with the director on that one particular one.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Joan. Okay, any other comments? Okay, you see the recommendation that the committee note the contents of the report and progress made against 23-24 internal audit annual risk-based plan. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Good. John, anyone against the recommendation? That's carried unanimously. Thank you again, Joan and Andrew, and I think the next one's yours as well. Recommendation monitoring.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Okay, the purpose of this report then is to provide members of the committee with a position statement on the internal audit recommendations made, implemented and outstanding or overdue as at the 30th of August 2023. Appendix A provides the detail for yourselves. You can see that a total of 13 high and medium priority recommendations have been made following the conclusion of audits from 23-24 plan. All these recommendations have been agreed, and 3 have been implemented and 10 have a future implementation date. It can be seen that no recommendations are currently overdue, but there are recommendations made prior to this financial year that still have future planned implementation dates, as you've already just picked up. Many recommendations made in the 22-23 audit still have future target dates. However, as detailed in Appendix A, a lot of these audits were completed within the last 6 months, and therefore timescales were agreed, and they're still within the time frame we would expect. However, Appendix B provides details of the 5 recommendations made during the 21-22 audits that still have future target dates. These are also highlighted to chief officers through SLT and to make them aware of the outstanding risks or the outstanding actions that their service are yet to do. The monitoring of these recommendations is undertaken regularly by the auditors, and we have a process in place to do that. And any undue delays or issues are highlighted to senior management, as Thomas said, and ultimately to this committee. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Hooper?
Thanks, Joan. Just a question on, if you look at the table 2, when it talks about the recommendation, we've got 3 high, 10 medium, 13 in total. The 3 that are implemented, what would be really useful for us is to be able to understand whether they were the 3 high priority, because if they were, then that's great. And the other 10 are all medium priority. At the moment, we're missing a bit. And when you go to the detail, I'm still missing it. So can that be, I suppose it's a comment, Gareth, sorry, can that be reflected in future ones? Because it would just give us a bit more insight and ability to interrogate. Thank you.
That's okay.
Yeah, of course I could make implemented and put the two columns in there, so you'll see the highs and the mediums within that column.
Any other questions? Any comments? I've got the same comments as I made about the two matters previously in Appendix, the issues in Appendix B. If we look at corporate safeguarding, we had an agreed date, presumably by the manager and the director and whoever else should be involved in that, of April 2022. There was a revised date of April 23. There's another revised date of November 23. That gives me grave concerns, and it's still float. You know, November's, I know, 2 months off, but it's still floating in the ether there. And you know, we've got the comments or the agreed actions due to the need to create the learning material communications and upskilling of managers and establishing a cohesive IDEV process. It's anticipated that this work will be completed by April 22. Yeah, the questions I would like to ask is, why has it taken nearly 18 months to get to where we've got? Now, I presume COVID may come into it and such like, but presumably people working from home could have delivered some of this at home rather than in work. So that's the first one. Again, the second one in regards to disabled facility grants slipped 6 months. Happy to leave that just for the time being. But then you've got cybersecurity January 2022, revised May 23, and a revised again on the 15th of September, which presumably was just before our committee. So, again, that one gives me concern. And again, the next one in cyber is exactly the same. And pothole repairs, obviously, they've had a agreed date of May 23, and that's been revised till the end of this month. I'm just wondering again whether or not whoever's responsible for corporate safeguarding and cyber security actually should come to the meeting and explain why these delays are there and what actually they are now dealing with to deal with it. I don't know what committee's view is or members' view is, but it gives me concern that, you've got 18 months nearly on some of these, and longer, with no one being accountable for it. And I think maybe they need to appear sometimes before audit and governance to say, look, what are people playing at? Sorry, Councillor Hooper.
Just to endorse that, I think it gives another level of support to the auditors as well to say, if that is don't want it to be a sanction or anything like that. We want it to be an explanatory type of thing. But still, it would, if I was a manager, I wouldn't really want to be finding myself hauled at 8:25 on a Monday evening in front of a slot. Thanks. So I think it's a good thing.
Okay, I don't know whether. Oh, Councillor Prothero.
I'm agreeing with Councillor Hooper, and I think as for most of us committee members, we're not auditors. We are learning as we go along, and to have the opportunity to have a little bit more background and context to what we do and what we're looking at and what we're scrutinising can only be a good thing. So I think it would be really useful. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from anyone? Can I therefore suggest that apart from the recommendation, which I'll look at when I get back to it, that we consider, obviously we consider the information provided in respect to the, or we note the information provided in respect to the status and high and medium recommendations made, but we have a second recommendation that the director and head of service responsible for corporate safeguarding be invited to attend, not appears, be invited to attend Governance and Audit Committee in October to provide an explanation as to why the agreed actions are outstanding and what action plan they got in place to address it as a matter of urgency. That's in regards to the corporate safeguarding and cyber security. So the director responsible for cyber security, I don't know whether I'm putting you in the pot here, Tom, but and the head of service again come forward and explain why we've been waiting so long and what action plan they have to put it in place. So I suggest those as a recommendation. Can I have someone to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder, Councillor Hooper. Anyone against those recommendations? No, that's carried unanimously. So we'll see the director responsible for corporate safeguarding, the head service, and the director for cybersecurity and head of service to come before us. And maybe Andrew, you can make the invite there, and maybe just provide a little bit of background for the committee as to where we got to there for members to consider, and why this is important to be dealt with.
We'll do that, Chair. Yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you for that. Then item 12, which is the updated forward work programme.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, agenda item 12 is the updated forward work programme. It's the standard report that you're used to seeing. Table at 2.3 lists the items that are due to the next meeting, which is the 23rd of October. And Appendix A provides a detailed timetable. So members of the committee are asked to endorse the schedule or to highlight any further items that they'd like to put on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Any comments? Obviously, in regards to the schedule, we'll now be inviting the directors for safeguarding and cybersecurity. So those two items need to be separate on the agenda, so committee can see that. And then we've got the standard items on the agenda for the meeting in any event. So recommendation is that we note the forward work programme, and obviously we invite the director and head of service for corporate safeguarding and cyber to the next meeting, in addition to all the other matters. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? No. Thank you. That's unanimous. Item 13. Any other items deemed urgent? There are none. Then part 2, which is the exempt items. Clearly, there aren't any. Can I just again thank members for their contribution this evening? I think it's been a very valuable meeting again. Thank you all for your contribution. Thank you all for staying the distance, because another very long meeting. Can I just wish you all, I would say, a very safe journey home, but most of you are at home, I should imagine, in any event. So thank you very much, and see you in October.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye, everybody.